Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So yesterday on my Instagram, I posted this fun exercise, fun graphic, giving my 2020s best value draft picks, where it was basically non-top 10 picks, who were the best picks thus far of the 2020s. And obviously the 2020s just started, so it's kind of tough to do. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to make a YouTube video of just the best selections of the entire 21st century, 2000 all the way up until the 2023 draft. There's not going to be any of those guys from the 2020s because their career hasn't really panned out. But look at the best picks of the entire 21st century. There's going to be no top 10 picks here because although McDavid at first overall is a fantastic pick, he's going to end up being a top 3 player of all time. He went first overall for a reason. And even guys that went think of Matthew Tkachuk at 6th overall, fantastic pick. Well, maybe not for the Calgary Flames, but fantastic pick. But still, at 6th overall, you kind of expect a high-level player. We're going to be doing non-top 10 picks. And actually, out of the guys that I ended up going with, there's not a single first-round pick on this. So it's going to be based on how good these guys are, how good their overall careers were, because some of these guys' careers are already over. They were drafted in the 2000s. How good are they right now if they're still actively playing? And based on their draft position, considering you expect something different there's one guy that went 45th. You expect something different at 45th overall compared to the guy at number 10 that went 245th. There's different levels of expectations in terms of how great of a draft pick is. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And up first, that guy that went 245th overall is Dustin Byfuglien. He's an interesting one because his prime was very good. He was a top 8 to 12 defenseman. Wasn't like some of the other guys that I'm going to list that were the best players in the entire league. But at 245th, I think back then that was the 8th or 9th round, back when they even had 9 rounds. So this was an absolute steal. Back in the day, he played for the Chicago Blackhawks. He was a forward early on for the Chicago Blackhawks, won a Stanley Cup, then goes to the Winnipeg Jets. And yeah, never had a top 5 Norris finish, but consistently would pick up Norris votes, score you 15 to 20 goals every single season, was the power defenseman of the kind of mid-2010s that opposing forwards were absolutely horrified of. So Dustin Byfuglien, amazing pick. You could argue for him to be higher, but I think when you realize the other guys that I have, I think you'll understand why I have him at number 10. Number 9, Brad Marchand, who went 71st overall. When looking at Brad Marchand, he was a 3rd-round pick, and he took a while to develop. Even when they won the Stanley Cup back in 2011, he wasn't this high-level player. He was a solid second liner. He didn't really break out until he was 26 years old, but his 5-year prime is so impressive. He had 2 first-team All-NHLs, another two second-team All-NHLs, hit the 100-point mark. He was a top 12 player in the entire NHL during his prime. And even now, the last 3 years, he has kind of been on the decline, but even decline for him is still around the 70-point. Very good two-way guy. You can make an argument for him over the guy that I have at number 8, but I just think the guy that I have at number 8 that's still in his prime got his start earlier in terms of playing at a high level. And that guy at number 8 is Brayden Point, who went 79th overall back in 2014. He went 8 spots after Brad Marchand comparatively, but I do have Brayden Point higher considering he came into the NHL at 20 years old, and by 21, he was a legit number 1 center. By his 3rd year in the league, he had 41 goals, 51 assists, 92 points. By the time he was 24 and 25, he went back-to-back as Stanley Cup champions as the number 1 center on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Yes, he plays with Nikita Kucherov. That definitely helps him out, helps us get his stats up. But Brad Marchand also played with Patrice Bergeron and David Pastrnak for his best season. He had the goddamn perfection line, so I'm not going to hear any complaints. I'm not going to hear any criticism about Point being a Kucherov merchant when Marchand had one of the best lines of the entire 21st century. And in the last 2 years, Point is having some of his best years. Last year, 51 goals, 44 assists. This year, 46 goals, 44 assists. An undersized center, but has still been a top 15, top 12 to 16 player in the entire NHL, basically the last 4 or 5 years. He's an absolute stud, and to get him at the middle of the 3rd round, it's pretty funny. The Islanders used to get clowned because they took a goalie 2 picks before Brayden Point. I remember back in 2020, people would shit on him, and it turned out to be Sorokin. I know Point's obviously better than Sorokin, but it's crazy that those guys went 2 picks apart in the goddamn 3rd round. Absolutely insane. At number 7, 178th overall, all the way back in the 6th round back in 2010 by the Ottawa Senators. they selected Mark Stone. If you couldn't tell by now, also, this isn't solely based on the team that selected it. It's just overall their careers, how good they are. Yes, some of these guys got traded. You're going to see that. They never ended up on that team. It's just relative to the player and the draft selection, if that makes sense. So Mark Stone, 168th overall. When looking at him, basically right out of the gate, he had like 63 points, was a Calder finalist. He was fantastic. Didn't debut until he was a little bit older, like 23 years old, but he was amazing right out of the gate. He was a legit two-way first liner. And then basically from 2018 on, he's been around the point per game Selke guy every single season. Last year, the climax of his career, obviously wins the Stanley Cup, a massive part of that. He's been a top, I had him as high as like 13th in the entire league 2-3 years ago, but he's been a top 20-ish guy in the NHL for the past 5 years for the most part. Amazing two-way, probably the best two-way winger of the last 5 years for the most part. So the fact that they got him 178th overall all the way back in the 6th round to get a genuine franchise piece. He was the franchise, him and Carlson, back in the late 2010s for the Ottawa Senators, and he was the franchise acquisition for the Vegas Golden Knights before they got Jack Eichel. Mark Stone at 178th is absolutely insane value. Number 6, another guy that got traded eventually. He didn't even play a game for this team, but Adam Fox, 66th overall to the Calgary Flames. Then he got traded to Carolina and Doug Hamilton trade. Then he kind of demanded his way to New York. But when looking at Adam Fox, although I don't really like how he handled that, this guy's a gamer. One-time Norris winner already, only at the age of 25. Basically, since that Norris win, his rookie year was very underrated. He had 40 points in 72 games. Just he debuted with Makar and Hughes, so he didn't get the respect. And David Quinn only played him 18 games. As crazy as that is, considering the following year he won the goddamn Norris. So when looking at him the last 3 years, he has been a top 3 defenseman in the entire NHL, basically every single year outside of maybe 2022. He's fantastic, amazing both ways. The fact that in the early 3rd round, you got a top 3 defenseman of this generation, in my opinion. I think it's going to be Makar, number 1, obviously, Fox, and then Hughes, and then arguably make it a top 4 with Miro Heiskanen. But he's going to be the defenseman of the when you think about the 2020s defenseman, it's going to be Makar, and then it's probably going to be Adam Fox next. So the fact that they got him at 66th, I have a guy ahead of him that's also a defenseman next up that has two Norris trophies and also far more team success, so he's higher. But Adam Fox, it wouldn't surprise me if he jumps that guy that I have up next down the line if he can get some more trophies and eventually have a better longevity. And at number 5, 54th overall, Duncan Keith is that defenseman, 2-time Norris winner. From 2010 to 2016, if you said over that stretch, Duncan Keith was the best defenseman in the entire NHL, there was a couple guys, don't get me wrong, Erik Karlsson, Drew Doughty, even Zdeno Chara was still playing at an extremely high level then towards the end of that. Duncan Keith arguably was the best defenseman in the NHL during that stretch, winning those 2 Norrises, was the only guy besides Karlsson to win those 2 Norrises, and he was the backbone of the blue line backbone of the Chicago Blackhawks dynasty. He was fantastic. The only problem is he did kind of fall off starting in like 2017, 2018, once he hit the age of like 31, 32, so he doesn't have that good of longevity, but it's still at 54th overall for the Blackhawks to get their franchise defenseman. They got their 2 franchise forwards high up in the draft. Kane 1st overall, Taves 3rd overall. They didn't really pick a defenseman that high, but eventually Duncan Keith did emerge as that guy and led to the most recent NHL dynasty of the Chicago Blackhawks. Fourth is Patrice Bergeron, who went 45th overall to the Boston Bruins back in 2003, the legendary 2003 draft. 6-time Selke winner. He was still a Selke winner when he retired in 2023 at the age of like 36. The best two-way defense, probably the best defensive center in the entire NHL history. I don't think that's ridiculous to say. I'd probably say Datsuk's maybe the best two-way guy overall. But Bergeron, his defensive impact was insane. The advanced stats, the plus minus, the everything. Him on the ice versus off the ice, it's insane. He was the best defensive center that I've ever watched in my entire life. So the fact that Boston got this guy in the middle of the 2nd round is an absolute snipe and one of the best draft picks of all time. Third, we get to a kind of consensus third in my opinion. And at third, I have Joe Pavelski, who went up 205th overall. 205th overall. He was a 7th round selection. And yeah, he has been Mr. Consistent basically the past 15 years. Point per game, fantastic first liner. Back in his San Jose days, peaked at around the 40-ish goal guy. Made a 2nd team All NHL. The only reason he's not top 2 is he was never like a true franchise level guy. I think he could end up in the Hall of Fame one day, but that's more so based on his longevity. I don't think that he had the peak that the two guys ahead of him did have. Definitely not the peak that the guy that I have up next had ahead of him, but he was a fantastic player. And to get that in the 7th round, 20 years of just extremely high level first line hockey is insane for the San Jose Sharks, and that's why they were so competitive. Yes, they drafted Marleau, and yes, they eventually traded for Thornton, who was a first overall selection, but getting a guy like Pavelski was massive for their franchise. Second, this might be controversial, I have Nikita Kucherov here at 58th overall. I know Pavelski went later, but when you consider the fact that Kucherov, a late second-round pick, third to last selection in the second round back when there was only 30 teams, and he is genuinely on pace to be a top 40 player of all time. When you look at it, two-time Art Ross might still win the Hart this year. I think he probably has like a 5 to 10, probably like a 15% chance to win it. But if he is, regardless, two-time Art Ross winner, one-time Hart winner, two-time Cup winner, being the best forward, best skater on those two Cups, his legacy is absolutely insane. And so although I can't have him number one, considering he still has a second-round pick that is decently high, I still think insane resume that he gets that second overall spot for me. And then lastly, you probably assume who it is by now, but I got Kirill Kaprizov at 135th overall. When looking at it, he was a 5th round selection. So don't get me wrong, Kucherov, better player, far better career. Kaprizov's not going to catch Kucherov. He would have to go on a generational run. But I think the fact that the Minnesota Wild got a genuine franchise, in my opinion, when he's on, he's arguably a top 10 player in the entire NHL. You saw him in the back half of this year. You saw him 2 years ago when he had 47 goals, 61 assists. He is a gamer. He just needs more talent around him, and Minnesota can't provide the talent around him because of their salary cap situation, because of Suter and Parise's buyouts. But Kaprizov is insanely talented. The fact that they got him in the 5th round, 135th overall. Again, Kucherov late second, nuts, but still a second round pick, still top 60. Kaprizov, 135th overall. Yes, he did take a while to come over because of the Russia stuff, but I think this guy is going to be a Hall of Famer one day, and he is a genuine franchise level player, and especially considering he's a winger, the fact that he is that franchise elevator. The dude put up 108 points that one season with like Ryan Hartman and Matt Zuccarello and a 34-year-old Matt Zuccarello as his line mates. I think Kaprizov is very underrated right now in the NHL. He is fantastic, and as a result, I think he is the best draft pick of the entire 21st century. Yes, he still needs to stack on multiple elite seasons, but I think that he will do that, and at the end of the day, he will be considered a better draft pick than Nikita Kucherov, who also is fantastic in his own right. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? Again, Byfuglien at 245th, Marchand 71st, Point 79th, Stone 178th, Fox 66th, Keith 54th, Bergeron 45th, Pavelski 205th, Kucherov 58th, and Kaprizov 135th. I'd understand if you have Kucherov number one. I 1,000% understand that. If you think the gap between draft selection is worthy of the talent gap, career gap between Kucherov and Kaprizov, I just go Kaprizov. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? What would your order be? Again, based on the talent, what career they did have, what are you projecting their career to be, as well as what their draft position is. Let me know in the comments what your order would be. I'll be seeing the next one. Also, no goalies. I should have said that at the start. I'll put a text in, but it's kind of obvious because when you look at the starters in today's NHL, most of them aren't first-round picks, so it'd be stupid to be like, it's all goal. It would be all goalies. You get what I'm saying? So no goalies. But you probably saw that at the start of the video. I'll be seeing the next one.